Well, we are very excited to be here, first of all, and talk about how ads and how creative really works. I mean, that's really what Ace Metrix is all about. One of the interesting topics out there today is all about program engagement, and how does somebody and how the way you watch a particular show really impact the way that you consume the advertising on that show. And there's really two schools of thought. One is higher the program engagement, the higher the effect of the ad. The other school of thought is that, you know, they're kind of independent, and people process ads independently from the way they process content. And we felt it would be a great idea to study it and see what the data says. And that's really what we endeavored to do, is look at the data. We're somewhat uniquely qualified to be able to do that because we have close to 15,000 ads in our database. And we have tested those ads against the exact same questions in the exact same sample. And some of those questions relate to, would you watch this ad again under these different viewing conditions? And because we had that, it gave us a great data mining opportunity, if you will, to really understand how that worked.
Okay, and what were some of the what were the discoveries?
The surprising finding, and this is surprising to us, is that there's virtually no relationship between program engagement level and the efficacy of the ad, the impact of that ad on you. So whether you watch that show 9 times out of 10, you friended it on Facebook, you talk about it all day long. We measured all these different attributes about program engagement. The way you process an ad on that show is exactly the same as if you watch that show once or twice out of 10 times. And that, I think, is a really fundamentally unique finding, that the way you process ads, we as human beings have learned to separate program content from ad content. The intensity with which you watch a show really has no bearing on the way the ad cuts through and the way the ad delivers against you. So that was probably the most surprising finding. Once we dove into it deeper, it became more logical, but we had some secondary findings as well. But that real key determinant of how you process an ad is really not related to program engagement.
Yeah, I mean, I almost view sort of three scenarios. So you have good ad, program I love; good ad, program I don't really watch;
right.
Bad ad, program I love; bad ad, program I don't love; and then an ad related to a brand that I like or know and like, or don't like or don't know.
Right.
And so those are kind of all the
it even goes more complex than that, because it goes to your actual, the relevance of that ad to you. So, and I think that's what you're getting at with the last one, is that it's not just a brand you know and love. It's like, am I really buying a car within the next 6 months? If so, I'm much more attuned to automotive ads. They're much more relevant to me. And that's some of the things that we've learned through all of our days on the digital side, is that relevance and purchase intent and measuring intention is really a key to how that ad is going to be consumed. We actually looked at a couple of dimensions, and one of the things that we measure, or a couple of things we measure for the ACE score, which is our scoring algorithm, is how persuasive the ad is and how watchable the ad is. And the two of those go together to make a truly great ad. Most times they work together. So you have persuasion and watchability for a great ad being very high. For a very bad ad, you see persuasion and watchability very low. What we're calling out in the presentation today is a few what we call black swan ads based on the book, which is kind of very unlikely scenario ads where you have high in one and low in the other. An example is the GoDaddy ads. For certain demographics, the GoDaddy ads are very high in watchability, very low in persuasion. But we had a couple other examples that we'll show today. Again, through almost 15,000 ads, it's less than 1% of ads that show this really wide discrepancy between watchability and persuasion. But it has huge implications for frequency. So if you have an ad that's highly persuasive, and we'll show one for Off, which is a clip-on mosquito repellent. I don't know if you remember that ad. Very high in persuasion, one of the highest we've ever had. Very low in watchability. People get creeped out about it. There's a buzzing sound that sound like fingernails in a blackboard, and people do not want to watch it more than once. but they're highly persuaded for the product when they see it once. That has huge implications for how you deliver that ad, how you schedule it. So it's really important to be able to watch both and understand, is this ad highly watchable or is it just persuasive?
So let's switch gears a little bit. Have you done any research specifically around online video and online video advertising?
Yeah, we do both actually. So we score, our mission as a company is to score every single television ad, not just the ads that you're in your category or not just the ads for your brand. How viewers really consume an ad to us is in context to with every other ad they see is what you really want to look at. And that includes online ads. So we test mobile ads, we test online ads. Google's a big customer of ours, and we had some fun testing their latest creatives that ran that were the opposite of what everybody seems to be doing. Everybody seems to be moving for higher frequency of 15s. Google goes 1 frequency and 90 seconds. Very, very different strategies, but highly impactful to the audience.
So just to be clear, they had one ad that was 90 seconds long that ran against online video content?
No, that one actually just ran on television. And then they had repeats of that ad running on YouTube and different versions of that running on YouTube. But testing online is I think, you have to be able to do both now, and you have to be able to have the same mechanism to compare an ad online versus offline. And as you know, they've been so separate that you can't really even have the same measurements for an online ad versus an offline ad. But we find a lot of times the online ad is much more around likability, and what contributes to the virality of the ad is this kind of likability component. That doesn't mean that somebody's going to go out and buy it. It doesn't mean it's a highly persuasive ad because it's funny or it's kind of got this real entertainment value. It's great for driving reach, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the ad is highly persuasive in terms of getting the behavior you want.
So people have talked about, you have GRPs and kind of helping brands and media buyers kind of have that apples to apples comparison and sort of having a comparable for online so that it's simplicity, people don't like to be challenged mentally. So can you talk about kind of your thoughts on all that?
Well, I think it kind of comes back to the lowest common denominator on how you buy this stuff, which is all about tonnage, right? It's all about eyeballs and tonnage. Our point of view is that eyeballs and tonnage are great, and you need to have consistent ways of doing that. So how many eyeballs am I getting on my online views? How do I pay for that? How many eyeballs am I getting for my television spot? Our view is that you're really missing the point, though, because if you're not measuring the impact of those ads and the creative power of those ads, you're still back to the tonnage. So, back to the old days, I remember dealing with media planners, and it's like, if my ad didn't test well, I'm going to add more weight. It's like, what? I mean, this makes no sense. And what we're trying to do is have a ubiquitous way of measuring creative in real time, regardless of medium, online, mobile, so that you can start to make intelligent decisions about managing your GRP weight or managing, how you're going to distribute that ad based on the power of that creative.
So just to staying on that same topic, so how do online publishers get brands and buying agencies away from, focusing strictly on, how many impressions are you going to deliver to me versus, hey, you shouldn't be focused on that, you should be focused on engagement. And then how do we measure that, and how do we show you that we nailed it for you?
Yeah, I think the trouble we always had when I was at Yahoo is that reach accumulates much differently online than it does over television, and the way that you have to manage a campaign is fundamentally different because of that. I think online we had great analytic tools, but we were almost hyper-focused on the behaviors as opposed to people actually having that perception of the brand and being able to do something later. It was all about the click. It was all about, am I going to buy this thing today? Am I going to click through and go to the website? So I think from the digital side, what we tell the digital folks is you've got to think more like TV in terms of creating lasting relationships with your consumers and your brands and being able to test those in the same way. TV needs to be more like digital in terms of accountability and real time and being able to make decisions like that. So I think there's a huge opportunity to kind of bring both of these together as long as you're in a comment digital technology platform to be able to measure it. For an effective ad, I think there's a couple of dimensions. First of all, the ad has to be persuasive. To get persuasive, you need to get attention and likability high. You also need to have information content. Ads that are likable, funny, beer ads are the best examples of this, really don't last. I mean, they're funny, people like to watch them, high watchability scores. So the first thing is, especially for TV, is to have a breadth of, you're adding something of value. You're relevant and adding information to those particular spots. That's, like Apple is a great example of that. There's a lot of information content in an Apple ad, even though it's very likable and persuasive. The second thing is, don't forget, we talk about targeting and we're always hyper-targeting, right? TV is still a mass medium, and the best ads actually appeal broadly. It's not that they just appeal to one specific demographic, and we see this all the time. Again, beer ads, I don't know why I have beer on the brain today, but some ads do very well with 21 to 25-year-old males, because that's the core beer drinking target, right? So they only test against those ads and they do really well, but they really offend women. So Budweiser, on the other hand, tests against everybody. And you can tell, because while they may not have huge responses by, outside their target demo, they don't offend anybody, and they're still likable across the entire portfolio. So I think this hyper-targeting thing, everybody wants to talk about more narrow targets. For a great TV ad, it appeals to everybody. You see that with M&Ms, you see that with Budweiser, you see that with Apple. Broad appeal is really what you want to go for.
What tools do you use to specifically measure things like engagement online?
Well, we're biased, obviously, to measuring the impact of the creative. We think that's the fundamental common denominator, is how well you respond as a viewer to that creative element holistically.
And is that by doing surveys? Or?
Yeah, it's essentially, we found, and again, why we work with Google is Google likes to be an algorithm about everything. They said, we cannot do an algorithm for this. But you have to have enough people. So we do 500 people per ad, per unit, because you really have to see across the demographics where these things are working and where they're not.
And is this a broad kind of composite of Americana? Like, are you getting people from the Midwest, New York, the South?
Geodemographically balanced across kind of general population. And we can heavy up to specific targets if you want as well. But it's really being able to have, if you see that you scored 600 on an ACE score, you want to be, you now have context for what that means on every competitive ad or even the best ads in the world. Because you're looking at all of them. And that point of context, I think, is what's really valuable.
Is a 600 a good score or a bad score?
600 is pretty good. 600 is pretty good. It's 0 to 950. The best we've had is about a 780.
And what ad was that for?
That one was for Samsung 3D TVs from last year. I don't know if you recall that one, but they went to the aquarium and they kind of cut out the aquarium, put the cube on top of their car. They had great music. That's another thing we find is music is very engaging. How do you sell a 3D TV on a 2D set, right? It's like, how do you sell a color TV on a black and white set? Brilliant the way they did it, and consumers really responded to it.
Now, when a brand scores that high, in that scenario, did you do a survey of a specific target audience or a broad general audience?
We look at every audience, then broken up by the target segments, and so we do everything from basically 16 plus, and then break it out into the key buying types. We are fundamentally a technology company that decided the best way to test ads was to test them like digital ads, meaning we wanted to do a census of all TV ads, test every single ad that breaks. We capture it digitally, we process it, put it in a survey, our own survey tool, 9 simple questions in an open end, out to the field, general sample companies, back into our system in less than 24 hours. The ability to collect all ads, we felt, added unique context to really understanding how well your ads are working. I said a 600 ad. If all your competitors are at a 750, that 600 doesn't look so good anymore, right? If all your competitors are 300, you're rocking. So the ability to have that competitive context is really what we were going for. Now we found all kinds of applications for that. We deliver it through iPad, iPhone, Droid applications. It's about getting information into the hands of marketers when they still need to make it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that because what do they do with your measures once they have them? Because because like digital, they're potentially able to make adjustments in near real time.
Yeah.
Right. So what do the end users do with
Well, that's
that?
exactly.
And actually sort of paraphrase the question.
Yeah.
Well, so the way customers use your data is, I put it into 3 buckets. The first is, most of them are pre-testing these ads. They want a quick turn view of maybe they've tweaked the commercial, they've got multiple creatives. I want to be able to test this, but I don't want to wait 6 weeks for the results. All of our CMOs are telling us, I want 90% right today. I don't want 100% right 6 weeks from now. Yeah, the decision's gone. So the first thing is to be able to pre-test, making sure you're putting the right ads on the air. The second is to monitor your competitors to see when do I need to refresh my creative? What's resonating with my consumers that my competitors are doing? And then the third is, how do I monitor my ads and get maximum shelf life out of them once they're running? That's the key difference, I think, that speed brings you. It's not like we're running a campaign, we'll find out if it works 6 months later. We're running a campaign and we can track week to week what's working with that ad, what's not working, how do we modify it, maybe put a different overlay. One of our customers was actually seeing that information was dropping quickly. It's one of those things that the information score actually drops very quickly with frequency. Once you learned it, you've learned it. So adding new nutrition facts every time every week that ad airs was very inexpensive for them to do, but extended that shelf life of that ad while it was running. One of our CMOs, and all of our clients get these mobile apps and just love them because you know, think of a CMO, they're having a meeting Monday morning, they get an alert on their phone that says a new competitive ad broke yesterday. You can not only see how the ad scored against your key demographic, you can actually also watch the ad. And they said, I can't find the creative half the time. It takes me 2 weeks to find the ad once I knew that my competitor's running something. So to be able to have all of that in real time totally changes the game, I think. And as researchers, if we want to be relevant, we've got to be fast. We've got to be at marketing speed, not at your own speed, doing your 4-week copy test because you've always done it that way. It's like, I need to be in the game and with how these guys are thinking and the speed with which they're. We had a great example. We were working with Kraft and they ran a Jell-O spot, and they hadn't run Jell-O since Bill Cosby when I was a kid. I mean, so the first time they were on air, they have hired Crispin Porter, edgy, great agency. First ad breaks, highest scoring Kraft ad we've ever done. There's a Facebook page that's set up saying that boycott Kraft Jell-O because they're scaring kids. It's kind of this edgy parental theme ad. I thought it was hilarious. We had the data in their hands that day because they were going to pull all their spots. They had 7 more in production. Crispin was like, what's going on? I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, we found that, there is this kind of lunatic fringe that thought the ads were too funny. But we also saw their core demographic saying, this is the funniest ad. I actually bring my kids in to watch this ad when they're in because we all laugh at it. Sometimes you get this reaction, and the reaction of most marketers is to pull it because you have no sense of gauging how big that is and what impact is to your brand. On the other hand, you don't want to go out with these, and the real reason that I think that they pick Crispin in the first place is they don't want the same old Casper milquetoast kind of ads. They want something that's edgy, that breaks through, that kind of is relevant to today's mom. And so you're walking that fine line. The ad's tested okay, but you see this Facebook social media eruption. What do? Well, you don't wait 6 weeks to get your copy scores back. You have like 30 minutes to make a decision on that. And so I think that notion of real time plays exactly into those kinds of decisions, that you have to contend with social media, you have to contend with people that may have that kind of not respond well to that creative. Is that the majority? Is that the minority? What are your core demographics saying? What does this say about the brand? Those are things that you need to make those decisions in, as I said, 24 hours you had to make that call. The Groupon ad that aired during the Super Bowl was also Crispin, and in that particular case, I think they admitted they got caught up with their own sense of creative, not Crispin so much as the client. We tested the ads. The ads did terribly. There was Living Social had an ad that did terribly. The Salesforce.com ads did terribly. It's like, really? You're spending over $1 million for a 30-second spot. Can't you just test this thing once just to make sure that the ad is kind of resonating the way you want it to? I think there's a lot of ego that gets in the creative process, and as you're starting to go down that path, It's very important to have a non-threatening way of just gauging this ad performance relative to everything else, just to do that extra check before you roll with it. I think this notion of social ratings, or understanding the social aspects of shows versus the Nielsen ratings of shows, is one that's based on this sense of engagement or intensity. I'm an avid fan. I know in my own household, Food Network is on all the time for some reason. My daughter's in high school. Food Network is the only show that, it's like, you know, the social rating for Food Network in our house would be off the scale. The key question for us, and what we tried to address in this study, is do the ads perform better for people that are in that state of high engagement, or would rate that show higher? And unfortunately, the answer is no. I think while a small network will take us to task on that every day, because what are they saying? Wait, we got a 0.1 share. We have to argue something, right? So we might as well argue that, well, the people that are watching are so engaged and you're so avid fans. So I buy their argument for that, or their desire to have an argument for that. The reality is you don't consume the ads differently. And that's the fundamental part of the research, that it's kind of what's new is old again. There was no significant difference across engagement level. Guess what there was a significant difference on? Demographics.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of turning things on their head in the advertising business today. I think what we've learned from digital, we want to apply the best things we've learned from digital to make TV more effective, and vice versa. I think digitally we've learned that relevance and intention and being able to measure those are absolutely critical in terms of how well that ad performs. And TV thought we're going to create relevance, or we're going to create intention. The reality is you're not. The consumers already have that. You have to buy a car. You're not buying a car because you saw a bunch of car ads. But the fact that you do have the intention to buy the car ads, now you're going to consume those ads more differently. You're going to pay more attention. The ads are going to have more information content for you. They're going to be more relevant for you. So to answer your question, it's kind of both. We want to look at it as broadly as we can because it's hitting a broad audience, but we also want to make sure we look at these kind of relevant targets that might be, you're an auto intender and you're going to purchase a car in 3 months. How do you consume that ad differently?